The last time I uploaded a full settings video was almost a year ago, and since then my settings have changed a lot. So I want to not only take this time to show you guys my new settings, but also show you guys some tips and tricks that helped improve my aim. So let's get into the first thing that we're going to cover, and that's going to be video settings. And so for video settings, for those of you guys with a new gen console, so PS5 and Xbox Series S and S, you're going to see this preferred mode option in your video settings. And for all of you guys who are competitive players who want the biggest advantage in game, you're going to want to set this to frame rate. This is just going to give you 120 FPS, and especially if you have a monitor or TV that refreshes at 120 Hz, you're going to see like a massive night and day difference, and the game just becomes a lot easier and more responsive to aim in. So I definitely recommend setting it to frame rate. So now let's move on to my general settings. So these are the settings that I use for basically all of my heroes. And starting off with horizontal and vertical sense, I keep that at 100. And that's just because I like a very responsive sense. But feel free to put that down to like 70, you know? Especially if you use the linear ramp, you definitely don't need to max it out if you don't want to. Okay, so now let's move on to aim assist strength. So I have my aim assist strength at 100. And nothing more to say about that. You want as much aim assist as the game will give you. So now aim assist window size. So I have that set to 30%. And for those of you guys who don't know what aim assist window size does, it's just the area around an enemy where your aim assist is triggered. So at 0, the area is just the enemy's hitbox. So the moment that your crosshair enters the enemy's hitbox, that's whenever your aim assist is triggered. So if you turn that up to 100, the area is a lot bigger. So if you see this, my crosshair starts getting slowed down, like even over here, and that's not nowhere near the enemy tracer's hitbox. So if the lower you set this, the more true to an enemy's hitbox it would be. Okay, so now let's move on to the next one, and that's aim assist legacy mode. So aim assist legacy mode is just a setting that you can use to revert back to Overwatch 1 aim assist. So sometime in 2018, Blizzard updated the aim assist engine or the aim assist system, and basically they added an option to go back to that. So now let's talk about aim assist easen. So what aim assist easen does, it just controls how smoothly your aim assist will ramp up as you approach a enemy's hitbox. So at 0, basically the moment that your crosshair enters the window size of an enemy, it's just going to give you 100% of your aim assist. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that. It's kind of jarring the moment that my crosshair enters that tracer's hitbox or aim assist window size. But if you set this to 100, it becomes a lot more smooth because your aim assist is basically ramping up as you get closer towards the enemy. So I set that to 100 because I just like how smooth it feels. Okay, so now let's move on to the next one, aim smoothing. So I have that set to 99. And for those of you guys who don't know how aim smoothing works, is it just takes your raw inputs and it tries averaging them out. So if you turn this down to 0, there is no algorithm averaging out or smoothing out your aim. This is just your complete raw inputs. And I used to play at a lower aim smoothing, but what would end up happening is because my sense was so reactive, I would sometimes find it hard to aim at like long distances, and I would find my crosshair slightly drifting off of the enemies. So ever since I started playing at a higher aim smoothing, I haven't seen as much as that. So I recommend playing at 99. I think it's the easiest, but feel free to keep that lower if you like a more responsive sensitivity. Okay, but really quick, if you guys are enjoying the video and these tips are helping you guys out, please consider giving a sub to the channel because it really helps out. Okay, anyways, enough self-promo, let's go back to the video. So the next one is aim easen. And for aim easen, what this does is it just changes the response curve of your aiming technique, and you really don't need to know what that means. Just know that if you don't use a linear ramp, you don't even need to look at the setting. So just keep it at 0 if you don't use linear ramp. Now, if you do use linear ramp, what this does is it just makes it a little bit easier to control without going deep into exactly what it does. But just know that if you use a linear ramp, try setting it to anywhere between 20 and 30. So if you use any other aiming technique, just keep it at 0. Okay, so now let's talk about dead zones. And this is where we can do some kind of cool stuff. So I have my left stick inner dead zone set to 0.03 and my left stick outer dead zone set to 0.4. So the reason why I have it set to 0.3, and I want to give a quick shout out to Hopeful because he was the first person to talk about this. But if you set your left inner dead zone to something where the game registers like a slight drift, what you can do is you can basically always have aim assist no matter what, right? So usually if you are not moving, then you don't get any aim assist. So as you can see, I turned up my left inner dead zone and my crosshair isn't moving, right? So aim assist will only trigger if you're moving. So if we set this to 0.3, you can see now my crosshair, even though I'm not even touching my controller, aim assist is thinking that I am moving because there's a slight drift, right? You can basically make stick drift work for you, right? So the game is registering these slight movements and it's causing my crosshair to move because aim assist thinks that I'm moving, right? And this is just a way to basically always have aim assist on. And that's just a really neat trick. I don't know how much it actually works in game because most of the time you are going to be moving, but there's probably some circumstances where that would be an advantage. So now let's talk about outer dead zone. So for your left outer dead zone, if you set this to, 0.5 or 0.4, what you can do is you can get very tight AD strafing, right? Something similar, you can basically strafe very similarly to what you can on PC. So if you set this to 100, you can just feel the difference, right? So at 100, the strafing speed is a lot slower and it isn't as tight, but your strafing instantly becomes way better. So I would definitely set this to at least 0.5. And if you can get it lower, then turn it lower if you can. So now let's talk about your right stick dead zones. So for your right stick inner dead zone, you just want to get that as low as possible before you see any stick drift. So a really quick way of finding out what to set your right stick inner dead zone is to just go into the practice range, set it to 0, and just keep on increasing it until you don't have any stick drift anymore. So just keep on doing that until you find a dead zone where you don't have any stick drift. So for me, it is around a 0.5. That is where all of my stick drift disappears. So you just want to keep that as low as possible, and that's just going to give you the most responsive, aiming. And for your outer dead zone, just keep it at 1, or you can put it down to like 95. But I wouldn't go lower than 95 because then you're just like limiting the amount of area you have to aim. So I'll just keep it at 1. So now we can quickly go over some of the hero specific changes that I made. Okay, so let's start off with Tracer. So I have crouch set to circle, I have toggle crouch set to triangle, I have jump set to X, and I changed her ultimate to L2 just because it makes it a lot easier to land those pulse bombs, and because you don't have to take your thumb off of your right stick. So I'll definitely recommend doing that for Tracer. So now we can talk about Widowmaker. And for Widow, I have her aim sensitivity set to 38.6 and her grapple sensitivity set to 75. For Ashe, I have her scope sense at 73, and for Soldier, I have hold to sprint. And that's basically it for my settings. So thank you guys for watching, and if you guys have any questions, put them in the comments or catch me on Twitch, where I'm going to be live as the video goes up. So if you have any questions or just need a place to chill, definitely check out twitch.tv/NateSucksAtThis. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.